What's up, everybody? Podkvlt back here. I am going to try to find Kelly, and we're going to try to co-host this thing. I am going to see if he's on. Find him real quick here. See if I can do that. I invited him to join, so let's see what we got here. We will go from there. Repo Queen, thanks for hopping back on. I'm trying to navigate this to get my buddy on so we could do our podcast together, but we're having some technical difficulties right now. So just sit tight, guys. I'll be back in just a second here. I'm going to see if I can't find him and go from there. And if any of you guys want to be a part of our live, feel free to hop on and say hi and be a part of what we're saying. You guys can get in the conversation. We don't mind. So if you guys are here and you want to be a part of our podcast, you're more than welcome to join us. I'm going to just try to find him real quick. I don't know what is going on. That didn't work. I don't know how to get out of this. Let me see here. There you go. All right, let me see what I can do here. Try to find this real quick. Sorry, guys, I'm just shooting him a message. I don't mean to. We are just hanging out. Thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight. Let's see what we got here. So
Hey,
I think I figured it out.
I don't know what's going on here. I tried.
So I think what it
Maybe that's I can't hear you at all.
is your you got to hit your camera
Do I have
button and your mic
anything
button.
going on with my stuff?
I can hear you.
I can't hear you at all. Okay, how about I just unplug everything and we'll just go.
Well, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Doesn't seem like my camera goes on though, right? Does that matter?
I don't see you. I hear you. It's fine though. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't turn on my camera. Okay, I'll turn on my camera. Uh, does it work now?
Yeah.
There we are. Cool. All right, well, let's do this. We
All
tried
right.
it. It didn't work. Cool. Hey, penniless pagan.
Penniless is awesome. She's right in the hard rock and heavy metal with us, so she'll be a good
Oh, nice. So we'll
she'll,
we'll
she'll
have someone that can have an opinion here, right?
she'll be a good one. Yeah.
All right, cool. So we're a little bit late going, um,
Yeah. That's all
but
right.
here's the premise of what we're supposed to talk about here, right? So, um, Metallica. I'm not a huge fan, but I used to be, right? I think that they made three really good albums, the first three, and then they dropped off with "Injustice for All," and even worse with the Black Album. And Black Album to me is when they turned to be U2. And they haven't done anything significant worth noticing at all since then, to me. So the thing is that what got them to become Metallica was that they pushed envelopes. They were really trying. They were going hard, innovating, and they really did their best to be at the top of the heap when it came to the metal community, right? And then they decided, nah, let's not do that. Let's be quote unquote artists, to quote Lars Ulrich, right? And I think that, with that effort, they never got anywhere. So they've just been playing songs that are 35 years old, to a bunch of people. And the reason why they're still relevant is because of good marketing and because they have good supporting bands, or, they're recognized for the legacy, right? So the point is, how much longer can you play that?
So anybody who knows me and knows my background will have no problem with me saying fuck Metallica. I'm not a fan. I respect them for what they did. I agree with you, right? First three, arguably maybe four albums, Injustice was kind of on the cusp, right? I was not a fan of the Black Album. Everything they've done since then has been awful. I was always Camp Pantera over Camp Metallica. I know that they had their controversies. I know that they had their issues with each other, right, of who was the better band, who was the bigger band. I always sided with Pantera. I never once said Metallica is better than Pantera. I still feel that way. I don't think that, Metallica is what it is, and I get that, right? It's an animal that now has been going a machine, but they are the Sex Pistols of the heavy metal world. They made 3 good albums and they rested on that for their entire career. They've done nothing since. And again, I understand what they accomplished and what they did in bringing metal to mainstream and all of that. But in terms of music that they made since 1988 has been awful, right? And so we're looking now at almost 40 years of bad music. The loads sucked, right? And people argue that they were okay. The Load and Reload were fucking terrible albums. They were awful. And I have said that before. I will keep saying that. They were foul. They weren't even Metallica, right? I don't know what it was. It was pure garbage.
Yeah, I agree. Cindy, Lauren, please, we want people to join in here. And I think that we can also, for people that actually do have a good opinion, we can just switch on the audio too, so you can join in and chat. So let us know if you want to join in here, right? I think the one of the main things was that when Lars started to talk about art too much, as opposed to like, we're a band that want to make music, and push ourselves in terms of musical performance or writing. But he became, so focused on being an auteur or whatever, right? I don't know if he had ambitions to become like, 90s Da Vinci or something like that. Right. Like if he wanted to sort of get some sort of, like, oh, I don't want to be remembered as just a half-assed drummer. I want to be remembered as a great artist,
Yeah. And there's a reason, right? When everybody does their top 5 metal drummers or top 10 metal drummers, there's a reason he's never on that list, right? He never even comes close to it, right? I mean, you have, Dave Lombardo always makes that list. Mike Portnoy always makes that list.
Gene Okerlund.
Yeah, there are a lot of guys that make that list. He doesn't even crack probably the top 20, right? So you can do what you want to do, right? Like, I get Metallica is what it is, right? And again, you look at like the guys in Metallica, right? James, Lars are the original 2, right? Dave Mustaine was part of the band. Kurt Hammett was part of the band, right? There were other guitarists before that. You had Cliff, obviously, on bass. He was no longer with us. Newstead. Now you had Brad Brock. before Robert Trujillo, right? So you have a couple of different bassists and stuff like that, right? So neither here nor there. And that's their argument, right? And diehard Metallica fans will argue that their worst albums were Newsted was on his way out. He wasn't even technically in the band. He recorded those albums separate. But either way, it still sucked, right? They were still awful records. And even, that they did, again, I know we talked about it before, but like coming out with a live album to save your career or cover albums to save your career don't do anything, right? Like to me, it doesn't matter. And again, I appreciate Metallica for what they did and what they're doing now, but I don't have to like it, right? I don't think they're a good band, right?
I don't appreciate at all what they're doing now. I'm sorry. I think it's ridiculing a lot. Like I'm going to see Dayside next week, right? Dayside are playing, and you can say that that's to their detriment and to the benefit of Metallica, but Dayside, the guy is 57 years old. He's been playing death metal since the mid 80s. He's still playing fucking death metal, right? I get it. Not every record is great or whatever, but he's doing his thing and he's trying to push the envelope, and I totally respect that. What I don't respect about Metallica is the fact that they just completely abandoned everything and they want to turn into U2 or something even bigger than that. And they just don't have the chops or the personality or whatever to do it. And they're trying so hard. Yeah. I think that they have stopped being a band and have turned into a mass product marketing machine. I agree. That the only thing they can do is sell tickets live because I don't think that they're selling many records.
So, all right. So I know a lot of time has passed, right? We can look back 30 years ago, 35 almost now years ago, right? The biggest controversy back in the day was when Limp Bizkit was talking crap about Ozzy Osbourne. And Zakk Wylde stepped in and said, you guys need to shut your mouths. You are not a good band. You're not even metal. We don't know why you're on this tour. And Sharon kicked them off of Ozfest because Zakk said, get them out of here or I'm going to kill them, right? Like we're going to beat their asses, right? Especially Zakk hated Fred Durst for all these years. Now, time heals wounds maybe, but Metallica goes out and gets Limp Bizkit, right? They're riding the pop bandwagon, right? Like they're relevant now because of Lollapalooza and all this stuff, right? But you got to remember, Zakk Wylde for a long time hated Fred Durst. They couldn't stand each other, right? And it was because Fred was talking crap about Ozzy, and Zakk was defended his musician and basically what he calls the godfather of heavy metal, right? So now Metallica invites them on tour. Like, do they not remember all the controversy with Zakk, right? And especially like Pantera didn't like Limp Bizkit. There were a lot of people in the heavy metal community that did not like Limp Bizkit, right? They couldn't stand them. They didn't want them on tours. They didn't want them doing anything, right? And it was just very weird now that like Metallica picks them. And I don't know the behind the scenes stuff, right? Neither one of us do, right? Like why they were on there. Maybe maybe the production company said, hey, you got to get a band. You have 5 bands to pick from. Pick one of these 5, right? And maybe Limp Bizkit was the best available option. I don't know, right? But you would think that of all the musicians out there and all the bands that they could have got, i.e. Slipknot, Lamb of God, all these other bands that would have been great on that bill as an opening act, they pick Limp Bizkit, who isn't technically metal, right? That you can argue that, right, very loosely, but it just doesn't make sense, right? And especially
with the
opening, right? So the opening act on your other night, 2 of the members in that band can't stand Fred Durst, and yet you pick them to go on tour. Like they got to be together. Like I said, I don't know. It might be water under the bridge. Zakk might have forgiven them. I don't know. But back in the day, Sharon kicked them off of Ozfest for the comments they made about Ozzy, and Zakk defended Ozzy, and now you bring them back on tour. Like it's like the circle of life, right? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I just spotted some things here. Panelist Pagan said a few things that I just want to address.
Yeah.
And one thing was that Metallica have always seemed basic to me, and it's one of the things that I actually liked about Metallica in the early days. I mean, it was very primal. It was very, very straightforward. It was straight ahead, just kill them all was just no holds barred. Let's just
Right.
play fast fucking music and
Yeah.
let's see what we can do. I don't give a shit about oh, do they have complicated riffs or whatever. I don't care about that at all. So basic is great when it works, right? That's not to say, Pagan, that you're wrong. I just think that being basic is not necessarily something that makes me dislike a band at all.
No.
Sometimes it's actually good.
And
But you're also right, Pagan, that the pendulum swings back, and there's always trends to come back, in cycles. Somehow, Metallica seem to have been able to avoid all those pendulums. They have always managed to have, and I credit this to a marketing team, to make them stay in the public eye enough for people to go see them. And just to value that, yeah, no, I don't like their latest album, but Ride the Lightning was good. So, and they're going to play songs from that album, so I'll go see them. People have been saying that for 40 years now. So that's the problem, that, that they become a product. They're not certainly not what Lars Ulrich thinks that they are. They're certainly not, sort of credible artists that is creating something valuable for the ages, and I mean, I don't want them to quit because I say so. That's not what I'm saying. If they're having fun and like playing together and they can make gobs of money on it, who am I to tell them to stop? But it's still like, if you want to protect your fucking legacy as Metallica, if you want to play stadium rock, if you want to do a Foo Fighters type thing, then do a Foo Fighters thing and play some Metallica covers or whatever, right? But if you want to protect Metallica and the legacy of Metallica and have that intact, it's maybe even too late now. Like, they should have just stopped a long time ago.
Again, though, I think, right, all those bad albums, all those downtimes, all the stuff with Napster and all that kind of stuff, like, I think it just tarnishes the legacy, right? And people seem to forget, right? Because metal has never really disappeared by any stretch of the imagination. But I will give credit where credit's due, as when Metallica goes on tour, they sell out stadiums, right? Every show they've had so far is sold out. It's very hard for metal acts to sell out big stadiums unless you're a top tier band. And most of the guys in metal have to realize that. They say, okay, we can't sell out a 40-seat arena. We can sell out a 20-seat arena. So let's do these lower scale shows and sell those out. Metallica has no problem selling out football stadiums, right? They could put 50,000 seats in the fan and fans in the seats. So credit where credit's due, right? I give them that, but I don't have to like it, right? Like, I wouldn't go see the Metallica show, right? I wouldn't.
And again, I created that. By the way, Robin, the people that joined, please let us know what you think about Metallica. Are you in favor or against? And if so, why? Either one. But again, I credit the marketing team a lot to the Metallica thing. Why they are able to sell out arenas. There's just a handful of metal bands ever that could sell out, stadiums, and some of them are even, sort of like Black Sabbath. Yes, we call them the fathers of metal, right? But they weren't really like a heavy metal band when they started or whatever, right? So you could say that they were like in the same school as Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, those guys in a way, back in the day, right? Not necessarily metal. So very, very, very few, and
I said,
right now,
now,
make gobs of money, but it's still like, it's not on the premise of what you are is what you were 35 years ago. And there's we talked about this yesterday when we met, right? They're piggybacking on their supporting acts too. Like, ooh, I like Limp Bizkit, and I get Metallica too, then fuck yeah, right? Like it'd be interesting to see like how many people actually leave after Limp Bizkit,
It just
before Metallica starts. That
right.
would
And
be
you know
cool.
what? And the thing that like Metallica was kind of genius when they said we're going to sell a package deal for 2 nights. You get a Friday and a Sunday, but you're not going to see the same. We won't play the same 2 songs. So we'll play 15 songs one night and then 15 songs the next night. So when you see Metallica for a 2 night set, but that means that one night you had to sit through Ice Nine Kills and a Five Finger Death Punch, and then the other night you had to sit through Mammoth to get to Pantera to get to Metallica, right? And
Right.
so you're not giving the fans very many options, right? Because again, if it wasn't for Wolfie being Eddie's son, you wouldn't know who Mammoth was, right? Like, let's face it, they're not a known band, right? And on the same end of the spectrum, right? Unless you're into horror shock rock, you don't know who Ice Nine Kills is, right? They're like the modern day Marilyn Manson, right? They write horror songs about horror movies that's been done 1,000 times before. They're an okay band, but they're not like so. Metallica, even picking the first bands, right? Now, we talked about this the other night too, right? I would definitely go to see Suicidal Pantera and Metallica before I would go and see whoever Limp Bizkit and Metallica, right? So if you're gonna buy one night, you're gonna see Suicidal and Pantera, right? So they don't give the fans many options, right? And you're kind of stuck because if you are a heavy metal fan, you have to sit through Limp Bizkit, right? If you're not a fan of Limp Bizkit, you're stuck for an hour and a half listening to crappy music.
I I I think that Pinless Pagan has a point here. It's a living legend situation. It's like they are Metallica. They are legendary because they did what they did in the past. And but I think now too with Limp Bizkit being
Right?
the supporting act, it's like how much further can they like push their audience? Like
This is the
how much more do
decline,
they
right?
expect the at least the originals to put up with? It's like I gotta sit through fucking Nookie before I hear
Right?
For Whom the Bell Tolls or whatever, right? It's like God damn it. Sorry. Not even the same wheelhouse.
Yeah,
Thank you,
it's
Pinless
not. And
Pagan.
again, I understand it's probably marketing. It's probably the management, right? It's probably the tour. They're probably saying, okay, these 5 bands are available. Pick the best option out of the 5 to go on supporting tour with you, right? Because I don't think that if they had their choice, they would have picked them, right? It's probably presented to them, right? Here are 4 bands. Pick the one that fit that you want to go on tour with, right? And again, picking Limp Bizkit right now isn't a dumb move, right? I'm not a fan, but it's going to bring that generational gap together, right? People like Limp Bizkit.
Though, like, because Limp Bizkit are people
I'm,
that are our age
they,
type of thing, almost, right?
but
It's
they,
still not bringing in the younger generation, right?
but they hit it big with Lollapalooza, right? When they came back on and Fred Durst did the dad bod thing, right? That was huge. That broke the internet. They're very relevant again now, right? Fred Durst is doing all this weird stuff with wearing the '80s track outfit and the cowboy. Wes Borland's always been crazy, so I don't really know, right?
And
But
it's so far from what
I get it,
Metallica is supposed to
right?
be.
And it's like they're going
Oh,
a step back. But again, the loyal Metallica fans aren't going to care, right? They can go on tour with a circus and people are going to go and see Metallica, right? They'll sit through 2 hours of Barnum and Bailey with trapeze artists and stunts to see Metallica. That's just their fans are loyal. And again, I'm not a loyal fan. I don't care about that. But their diehard fans would do that, right? They would sit through a circus.
yeah, and I think too that there's definitely an element of getting the bands like Limp Bizkit or whatever to play with Metallica is like someone saying that. Well, now you can go to your grave saying that you toured with Metallica, right?
Right.
They have that kind of name
But
recognition. It's like
if I'm
you
not
know
mistaken, didn't
every metal
didn't
band has heard of Metallica. Every metal band was influenced by Metallica on some level,
didn't
probably,
Metallica play
right?
Woodstock '99?
Do they?
Because Limp Bizkit was
99.
on. The
And
new Woodstock.
99, I was, yeah, the
'Cause I
first Woodstock
think
was 93, right?
because I think the one in '99 was the like famous one that they burned down, and that was the night like Korn played, Limp Bizkit played, Rage Against the Machine, Kid Rock. I think Metallica was on that bill,
Oh,
so
oh,
they
really?
technically
Okay.
have played together before. I'm pretty sure
So Limp Bizkit broke stuff?
all the time.
That's
My ears mostly,
that's so cliche.
right?
I'm sorry. Yeah, oh, geez. What can I say, right? You know,
And and there's
the
nothing
the
to
best thing that's
say.
happened to Metallica is Robert Trujillo. That's the best thing that's happened
Sure.
to Metallica. I think that was a vitamin injection, but I don't think that he's allowed to do very much. And Lars is fucking ruining everything too. Like, how many Metallica albums have you heard that have sounded good? You know, like the drum sound is usually shit.
Well, that's
Um,
why, because Lars wants the drums to be louder than every other instrument because he's an egotistical maniac.
it's it that's 99% of why they fucking suck is because Lars Ulrich wants his fucking thing and the other people are pretty chill about it. Like he's a pushy Danish guy and the rest of them are like chill Californians that,
Yeah.
okay, fine, chill. Yeah, we'll do your, whatever. I guess, I don't know. It's just, uh,
You
I
know,
just
and
can't stand it.
and I will say this, and I've argued this point too, right? When you had Kill 'Em All and you had Ride the Lightning, right? You basically had Dave Mustaine writing those songs, right? He was the
Right.
primary songwriter and guitarist, right? So
Mm,
when you listen to the first three Metallica albums, those songs were meant for Dave Mustaine. Kurt Hammett played them, right?
yeah,
So when Mustaine exited the band, he had wrote the entire next album. That was all Mustaine, right? So, if you think about Metallica at its core, between Cliff Burton, Mustaine, Ulrich, and Hetfield, right? If that core group would have stayed together, who knows what would have happened, right? Because I always thought Mustaine was the better songwriter and the better guitarist, right? Now you could argue Megadeth had some pretty lousy albums, and but for the most part they had a lot of staying power, right? Like Mustaine is a good musician, he's a very good songwriter, and he's a very good guitar player.
yeah, and he's a good marketer too. He's also someone that knows how to stay in the limelight. So I guess that's a
You know,
common thread there.
so and
But
again too, right? People,
but yeah, I think you're right. I think that we can, it's easy to pinpoint when Metallica went downhill, and that's when Burton died.
yeah,
You
of
know,
course, that was
it,
it.
and we talked about this yesterday too. I think it's like, you should just fold when you feel like, no, the spirit of the band is gone. Right? Mustaine was gone for better
Yeah,
or worse. And you got
thank you,
you got
Blondie.
a gift on your head.
I did.
Nice. Thank you so much. Was it Blondie Locks?
Blondie, yeah, she hooked it up.
Thank you so much, Blondie Locks. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, it's like kind of like, we've lost, John Paul Jones and John Bonham. Like we kicked Mustaine out, who was the main songwriter, and then we lost the star power Cliff Burton that everybody loved to see. It's like, okay, who do we have left? Hetfield and Lars.
That was it, right? And again, I'm not
So
knocking Kurt Hammett, right? Like Kurt Hammett was good for what he did, right? But
he's
you
fine.
can tell the pieces of the puzzle were missing in the decline of their music, right? It was just it went from good to okay to bad quickly, right? It wasn't a
Yeah,
very long span
horrible.
from when they put out basically Ride the Lightning to Injustice, and then the decline of Injustice was when they started like they really were starting to like become eclectic. Now, the Black Album, I think, was the last album that I thought that made any sense in that lineup, right? And again, I didn't care for it that much, right? To be frank, but it was one of the best selling metal albums of all time. So again, you give credit where credit's due. I'm not knocking it. I didn't personally care for it though, right? I didn't think any songs on it. Enter Sandman was a huge hit, and I didn't really care for it, right? Like I didn't like it. I wouldn't have went out and bought it, right? And I didn't buy it.
It's a good point. I mean, it's a quality album. It is. You know, like it's great for the kids. But like I said, it's like, you know, it's like U2's Joshua Tree or something. It's like now we're going to make a conscious effort to really sell out as much as we can to be able to sell as many records as we can.
Mhm.
And just, I don't give a shit about what it does to our roots or whatever, but that's what we're going to do. And that's fine if you want to make that choice. It's okay.
Yeah, and,
You know,
and that's it, right?
what came out of it was an actual quality album that I really don't like, but it's still quality music. It's not my
Yeah.
taste.
And then, you know,
But
the thing too.
then whatever came after that has just been, you know,
Yeah.
like shit bomb after shit bomb.
Right.
You know, like
You know, and we talked about this, I think, on one of our first podcasts, right? Like, what made Metallica better than Slayer, Testament, Exodus, you know, what's the other one? Anthrax.
yeah,
you
and
know,
none of them have come even close, right?
right. Like,
So,
what I don't understand, like, why, you know, Metallica was the band that they opted to back the way that they did when Testament wrote the better albums, right? The better sound quality, the heavier riffs, and the better voice is Testament, right? Dark Angel's another one, right? Like a Death Angel. I mean, you know, they were fantastic, right? Exodus was awesome. Anthrax was good. Like, I don't understand like why they focused so much on Metallica when you had at least 5 other bands writing better albums, right? And you can argue that too. Like Slayer had some pretty shitty albums, right? They had some really great ones, and then they had some really bad ones, right? And again, they did their own thing, right? They had their time and their place, but
Penniless Pagan Hat is right on the money.
and I get that, but they
They
didn't
played
really.
the game. Metallica played the game, and
But so did
Testament and
Megadeth,
Anthrax
right?
said, "No fucking way. We're gonna
Megadeth
keep
played the
writing the
game,
riffs.
though, right?
We're gonna play. We're gonna do things the way that we've done them.
You know,
And you record companies just pay for our studio time, and we'll go do our thing." And I think Metallica were like, "Yeah, no. If you say we'll become super famous, we want to become super famous. What do you need us to do?" And I think that, you know, that strokes the
I agree,
egos of the record
but
companies.
Megadeth did that too, right? They played the game. Dave
They're
was
still
like, you,
they can sell out arenas almost,
You know?
or nearby, not quite like Metallica, right? But he's still chugging. You know, he's also bigger than most. I mean, I'm gonna say he because there's only
Sure.
one member in Megadeth.
Right.
Sorry,
a eclectic group of musicians, right? You know, but again, it's just odd because like
you gotta be
had-
a fucking douchebag to lead a metal band in order to be able to get it to that level, I guess.
yeah, right. And again, I you know, it's just bizarre because, you know, out of all the artists that are out there that Metallica could have picked, right? It's just like it feels like they settled on Limp Bizkit, which to me is a horrible choice. But
Yeah.
again, it's going to alienate a lot of the Metallica fans that don't like Limp Bizkit, and there's a lot of them, right? But it seems like at this point they don't care. They don't really give a shit about their fans, at least from my perspective, right? Like,
Right. That's the thing. It's like, you know, how can we still maintain our arena level shows? Is more important to them than how can we put on the best show for the fans that really want to see us, you know, do well, right?
you know, right? And that's
It just feels more like, you know, how can we maintain our arena status is more important to
Sure.
them.
yeah,
Um,
and they do that, and you know, a lot of bands will do that, right? Like we understand that money comes involved with it, right? Whether they're going to be on a tour, whether they're going to be on a you know a specific one-off concert where you know you're playing a weekend festival, right? Like there are a lot of intangibles in that, right? But when you're going on a stadium tour and you have to tour with these people, right? Like I don't know if I would get along with Limp Bizkit, right? Like they're going to be your bandmates for the next 3.5, 4 months. Are they going to be able to tolerate each other? Or do they not just see each other? They just go on stage, right? Like it just seems weird, right? That you would want your friends to come with you. And I'm not saying they had to pick Anthrax or they had to pick Exodus or Testament or any one of those bands, right? But like you would think that you would pick somebody that you would roughly get along with, right? That you could talk music and you could, like, Limp Bizkit doesn't fit that mold at all.
Maybe it tells a story. I mean, I'm just hypothesizing here, right? But maybe
Maybe,
it tells
right?
a story that all the Testaments and the Exoduses and those guys on the planet and the Anthraxes or whatever are saying, "Fuck you, Metallica! You fucked up. You fucked us all up. You've
Yeah.
abandoned everything that we were together in the 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
You screwed it
So
all up for us."
I would agree with you to that point, but they did do the big four, right? So
Yes,
they
but
did like
for
men all.
that, sorry to interrupt you, right? But I still think that it was like they had to be there. I don't think it was because of them. I think that if Metallica would have said, "Nah," right, then they could have easily have found another big four type band, right?
Well, there would have
Like
been, right? Because
it
besides
totally would have
Metallica,
been
right?
just as good,
Right.
and fans probably would have said, "Yeah, no, it's true. It could have been Metallica, but yeah, you're right. They're a little too mainstream. Let's go with you know uh Dayside. I mean, I don't know that they're on top of my head
Yeah,
right
right.
now, right? But
You know,
Morbid Angel or something like that, right? And it would have been cool, or Entombed or something like that, right? I think that could have been acceptable too. So I think that was one where they could have gotten along without Metallica,
right.
right? And Metallica probably saw more of an opportunity there. I don't know. I don't know the background of it. I don't know if they were the instigators of that whole thing happening or if they were invited to participate. But
So
I
I
I
think they were. So from what I've heard, right, in the stories I've read, like they were the instigators, right? Like Metallica was
oh,
trying
they
to
were
say,
okay.
because again, a lot of people in the music
So we
business,
kind of flip flop here. Sorry, go ahead.
right? So a lot of those guys in the music business said, "Hey, if it wasn't for us, you wouldn't be where you're at, right? Because if you didn't have Metallica, Slayer, Testament, Exodus, Dark Angel, all those bands that were in the Bay Area at the time, right? You wouldn't have had Metallica, right? Like it was a scene. It was like the pre-grunge era of California, right? That Bay Area, right? And so it wasn't just Metallica, it was all those other bands. And they all said that if it wasn't for sharing tapes and getting like record albums and stuff like that in the wrong hands, because if you remember, Slayer was the first one to really break it big, right? They signed with Rick
Yeah,
Rubin, right? So
yeah,
they were the first ones after Show No Mercy, which was basically like a garage album that they had. They were the first major label band, right? Metallica was still on Metal Blade and signed with Megaforce, right? That Slayer was
yeah,
the one, right? Slayer was the band that like brought notoriety to that scene.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But they again, so what I'm going to say to
Until they
that
were
though is
back.
that then
Oh,
we're seeing a pattern that Metallica are only an arena sized band because they're piggybacking on other bands as well. Like
sure.
if it was just Metallica, you could argue that there would have been 3, 4, maybe 5 years in their career that they could have just by their own volition have filled arenas,
Yep.
right? But on the Loaded, Reloaded, Saint Anger, any of those
Oh,
tours, do you
terrible.
think that they
No.
do you think that would have been able to fill an arena on their own? No, like they
So
have
I,
to piggyback on
yeah.
other
So
bands to get that.
unfortunately, again, I'm not knocking Metallica fans. If you like Metallica and you're a fan of theirs, that's fine.
It's
We're
not
we're
about the
not
fans. Yeah,
saying anything about you as a person, right? But at that point, Metallica was so big, they could have literally dressed themselves in clown outfits and went on stage and sold out. Like Metallica had that cult following that
yeah,
loved them no matter what, right? Because there were fans that throughout the era of the Load and the Reload and the Saint Anger and the Monster one that they did, right?
oh,
Fans still liked them, right? They still supported them. They still fought for Metallica. And you're like, how in the world can you like these albums? And they're like, oh, well, they're great. It's them being artists. It's them trying something new. They're getting out of their comfort zone. They're doing different elements. They're adding this into the music. There were still diehard fans that loved them no matter what. And
sure.
unfortunately,
I mean,
they could have done anything and sold out. So the argument that the arena thing would have never ended with any of their bad albums, right? People still want to go see them through this shit.
well, sure, Yeah, no, you do have a point, right? But it's still like if you release 3 albums straight that bomb, even though the diehard fans still like them, right? As you tour the planet, like globally, yes, we sold how many ever million albums, but
Sure.
still, when you show up in Stockholm, Sweden, or London, UK, or Barcelona, Spain, or whatever, and it needs to be enough people close to there that are willing to pay the fee to go in and fill a stadium. I mean, everybody can fill a Japanese stadium.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I get it, right? You know,
But not me. But you see what I mean, right? So I really have a hard time seeing that after 3 or 4 albums on their own volition, that they would still, fill arenas. The same way that, I mean, we brought up Iron Maiden as a comparison, right? But Iron Maiden feel like they have just been staying on their track, and they haven't,
sure.
you know.
And again,
Yeah,
they're more of a global phenomenon, though, right? Like, Metallica has staying power in the United States, right? They have staying power in Europe. I don't know about about Asia or Australia, right? I don't know what they would probably do just fine there as well, right? But I think that the genre, the generations of musicians, especially with Metallica and the way that their whole kind of crew operates, it's just one of those things where, like I said, the fans are loyal to them no matter what. Whereas other bands, if you put out a bad album, they stop buying it, right? They'll tell you how bad it is. Metallica fans, for whatever reason, support them no matter what. And that's the one thing that, like, I don't get, right? And it's unlike anything I've seen.
I don't get it either, and I think it's really good for them. And hi, glad to have you back, by the way. Kai's bratty country girl.
That's Sylvia.
Okay, Sylvia. Yeah, I remember her from last time. But so good for them that they have loyal fans. That's great.
That's exactly it.
I'm not going to say that people are going to stop liking a band because one reason or another, though, right? But here's the thing. Like, to me, I used to really like them, right? I was really I tried really hard to like Injustice for All. I bought it with my hard-earned money. Well, not hard. I got an allowance from my parents at the time, but I didn't get much. So that's why I chose to spend that month's allowance on. So I really wanted to like it, and it just sucked. I tried really hard. I listened to it over and over again.
Later, Penniless.
And the in retrospect, the one thing that's come out of that album is the kick drums from the One song. Yeah. I think that was sort of the precursor of the whole Meshuggah Genti thing that everybody's doing now, right? That was sort of the proto version of that, I think. But I just didn't like it. Then I hoped for the next one. It was the Black Album, and there I thought about, well, fuck you, that's you too. And then I lost interest entirely, right? And that's fine. But for years and years after that, it was still like I could still put on Ride the Lightning or Master of Puppets or Kill 'Em All or whatever, and really enjoy it. Now
it's harder to listen to
any Metallica song that comes on now, doesn't matter which one, as much as I want to. Like there are some songs that are. I mean, the Ride the Lightning song itself, I love that song. It was one of the first metal songs I heard. And I just can't listen to it anymore because it's been, and that is sad, it's on me, right?
Yeah, of course.
That I get offended to that extent that I can't listen to the music anymore. But I just feel like I have come to dislike them to the extent that I can't listen to them anymore. Which is sad.
And again, I'm not taking sides of Metallica fans, right? Like, this is not where I'm going with this. But as a whole, most of Metallica's fan base are people who like hard rock but aren't heavy metal fans, right? Like, Metallica is the hardest thing they will listen to, right? They will be fans of the Foo Fighters, and they will be fans of Nirvana, and they will be fans of these other bands, right? Where you have people who are metal fans that will listen to extreme metal. They are basically like the fair weather Metallica fans. Most of them will leave it, then take it, right? They respect the first couple albums for what it did to the genre, but they're not the ones that are going to go and see Metallica, right? Like it's not your true heavy metal fans are not putting Metallica in that conversation of best metal band ever, right? They're not even probably top five in most people, right? After you get through the old school stuff like your Sabbaths and your, obviously, arguably Zeppelin and, stuff like that. But if you have a fair weather hard rock fan and you say, what's the best band in the world? They're going to tell you Metallica, right? Because if you ask me who the best band in the world is, Metallica is not even in my conversation.
Yeah. But let's get back to so the original question, right? Which is like, should they just pack it in because they're just done? They don't cut it anymore, and they're just padding the arenas with their supporting bands or whatever, right? It's like
and we joke about that, right? You asked the question, right? We talked about it, but like they are right now the modern day Kiss. They are going to keep going till it falls apart.
Yeah, I think you're right. And as long as people are willing to pay for it, they're gonna do it. As long as I guess that they're enjoying it, that they want to do it, they'll keep going. So, there's technically nothing wrong with that, right?
And there's not, right?
I just think that it's really sad, and I don't think that they warrant the same kind of conversation as Rolling Stones or whatever, right?
Right.
Which is totally, that produced dozens of albums over decades. They stayed relevant from 1963 to 1984 or whatever, right? Or even beyond that, right? So I don't think that comparison is relevant either. It's like,
right. And to even take it one step further, right? If I were to be brutally honest and say Metallica just needs to hang it up and stop and quit, I would have to say that about 20 other bands right now, right? Because if Metallica does it, I would definitely say Motley Crue, get the hell off the stage, right? You are no longer relevant. You can no longer do it, right? Guns N' Roses, as much as I love Guns N' Roses, you're out, right? Axl's not the same Axl that he was 20 years ago. Get off the stage, right? You're not able to do it, right? So when you say Metallica needs to hang it up, you probably have to put at least a dozen other bands in that situation that are doing the same thing they're doing, and probably not even at the level that Metallica is doing it, right? So as much as I love Guns N' Roses and as much as I love Motley Crue and as much as I love these other bands, if I'm going to say Metallica has to hit the road, those bands got to go too, right? They're not the same. They're only a skeleton of what they once were.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not fair to say that.
I'm not going to argue that.
As much as I dislike Metallica and as much as I love Guns N' Roses, I can't say Metallica needs to go, but Guns N' Roses has to stay, right? Because it's not the same category, right? And it's the same thing where you see a lot of these musicians, and I love AC/DC, right? But Brian Johnson is basically deaf. His vocal cords are going. They're not able to do it, yet he still says, I want to tour, right? So I love the spirit, right? The fighting spirit, but you can't do it. You just simply cannot do it. So at that point, it's like, you have to take the Journey road, right? Steve Perry broke his vocal cords, could not sing anymore. They got the Ariel from the Philippines, right? It's not Journey. It's basically a cover band at this point, but they kept going because of the legacy of the band. So you can't say Metallica's got to go, but then all these other bands, you're like, oh yeah, they're cool, right? They can stay. So
yeah.
You got to give props for them doing it.
Yeah. I think that a bit of a significant difference here, and maybe I'm speaking maybe this is all Lars's fault, and I really don't like Lars. You know that I don't like Lars. Maybe it's all his fault, but the thing is that they are making claims about their importance and their legacy or whatever that I think are overinflated. I think that even Journey, as snubbed as they have been by the rest of the music industry, I still think that they have, a modicum of humility there. I think that AC/DC have done nothing but the love for the music, and fine, Axl Rose also has an inflated ego or whatever. Like he couldn't get, was it the Chinese?
Democracy. I think it took him 20 years to make an
Yeah,
album.
yeah. It took him what 25 years to get that
Yeah.
out or whatever because he's a perfectionist or whatever. So he's kind of inflated ego too, right? But it's still like Lars has for 35 years been so adamant about the importance of their art and the integrity of their art. And ever since he started saying that shit, they've accomplished jack shit.
I
And
get it.
I,
And
I, I, I think that's the main difference. Like they just, yes, misfit. You are absolutely right.
yeah,
We talked about this a little bit
yeah,
earlier. You should have been
right.
here a few minutes ago.
That's it.
I said the same thing at least. Uh, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I think that was I think that's the main difference there. Is like
Yeah.
like you know.
And again too, right? Like again, you when you look at a band, you have to look at the active members of the band, right? So you said it before, like we could take or leave James. Robert Trujillo's cool, Kurt Hammett's cool, Lars is a jerk, right? But you can't break it down individually as much as you can with the staying power of that band, right? And Metallica is that one kind of hybrid band where no matter who seems to be a part of it, the main focus is and always will be Lars and James, right? They could fire Trujillo tomorrow. They could fire Kurt Hammett tomorrow, get a new bassist and get a new guitarist, still be Metallica and still sell out stadiums. So there has to be something said for those two kind of either, not getting along, making music together, but like their staying power for those two especially, right? Because we talk about the band, but if Robert Trujillo left tomorrow and they got a new bassist, Metallica wouldn't skip a beat, right? It's not them. And I don't know if James left the band, they would never get another singer. And if Lars left the band, I don't think they would get another drummer. I don't think they would
If
just
Lars
fold,
left the band, they might become good.
right?
Sorry, maybe
know?
that's the thing they need.
Right. Who knows, right?
Misfit, glad to have you here. It seems like you have opinions here. I'd love to know.
Yeah,
like
let's
you
hear
said,
them. That fire away. That's really it, right? And again, it's just one of those things where I think with the Metallica, not so much the band as a core group of four guys, but you said it before, right? They have great management, they have great marketing, they have a great team behind them. Their record deals have always been solid. They seem to have always gotten paid, right? They've never been cheated. It seems like they were the first, multi-million-dollar metal band, right? That were in that stratosphere category where everybody else was, scraping food off the plate. Metallica's eating steaks, right? Like they were always that band for whatever reason. They were put at that echelon, and none of the other bands got to that level. They've done very well for themselves. But if you take the next closest band other than Metallica, they're probably hundreds of millions of dollars less than they are.
Yeah, and I don't care.
Right.
Like I'm sure that Metallica cares about the money they make, and I'm sure that they would like to, add another tower to the castle or whatever. I don't know. I don't know where their motivation is coming from anymore. But
it's not.
But I think
music,
that
that's for sure.
I think that we all know that when their music has been failing terribly, they've been able to capitalize on other things, such as some kind of monster movie or whatever. Oh, we're having such a hard time if we're having conflicts or whatever. So the music is shit, but it was an interesting documentary or whatever, right? So they make all some money from that. And then people got interested in it because, oh, I want to see this mess of a band or whatever, right? Oh, and especially the old fans, it's like, oh, geez, they're really struggling. Maybe I should give them another chance or whatever, right? I had one comment on when I just posted a teaser about this podcast earlier, right? Someone said that I want Metallica to stick around because maybe they'll come up with one more good album. It would be great to hear them come up with one more.
The thing is right, when you look at albums, right, there are people, and we talked about this earlier, that think Load and Unload were great albums, right? That those songs were good, right? I thought they were horrible, right?
Yeah, I'm with
When
you. I
you
don't think they
when
were
you
good.
look at the two Load albums, right? There are fans that think those are arguably Metallica's best two albums, right? So you're always going to have that core group of people that think that way. And we sit here and say, how in the world can you say that those are great albums? But there are a plethora of fans that will argue to the death that those researched Metallica's career.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's no
I'm not
doubt
in
in
that
my
camp.
mind, and I'm gonna say Lars again. You know, I'm going to assume that they did extensive market research into what is it that our fans are looking to get, what is it they want to hear, and they will try to manufacture that for them to
Sure.
give the
Absolutely.
public the product that they are looking for. You know, I don't know for sure if that's what it is, but that's what I feel like, because every single thing that they produced
Yeah.
has been
It's
so inauthentic. You know, like it's been a product that they put out. You know, it hasn't been like, and maybe that's also why Lars feels such a fucking drive to always say that, oh, it's about the art and we're pushing the art and all that stuff, just to try to justify that.
Yeah.
No, you did market research and you pushed a product that you think that people want to get from the brand Metallica.
Mhm.
You know, that's, you know, and yeah, I don't know, I'm pissed off about it.
Right. And I think right.
And that is why I think that they are
And-
different than Guns N' Roses and those bands too. Just lay off, right? You know,
Right.
like, you're not a band anymore. You're a
Yeah.
product.
Yeah.
You're producing. You're pushing drugs to the druggies or whatever, right? I don't know.
You know, and
That's
because
taking
like,
fire, but
you know, like we talked about earlier, right? Metallica, when you say the name Metallica, right? They're still very relevant in today's music scene, right? But
are they?
I think that they are, to the fact that you have people that are loyal, like me and you are, to their first three albums, right? Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Kill 'Em All were three fantastic albums, right? We knew that it was very, very well received in the metal community and in the world of rock and roll, right? Those albums stood the test of time. Have they done anything else since then, right? And that's why I compare Metallica, like I said earlier, they're like the Sex Pistols of heavy metal, right? The Sex Pistols made one album and they've recorded other music, they've done a bunch of live stuff, but they haven't made an album. It took 30 years for them to make a second album. They rode God Save the Queen for 30 years. They had one album and 10 songs, and they would play variations of it. And it seems like Metallica is doing that, right? They had a core group of 25 awesome songs on those three albums that have basically solidified their career. And that's what everybody goes to see them for, right? They want to see Seek and Destroy. They want to hear Master of Puppets. No one's going to Metallica to say, I want to hear The Unforgiven too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm starting to just feel exhausted about this, in a way. Because it's so difficult when it's like, it was one of the first extreme metal bands or metal bands that I liked to begin
Sure.
with.
And we all are, right? You know,
I feel betrayed in a way, right?
And,
You know,
and,
like,
and
why the
it's
fuck
exactly
did
it,
you
right?
guys do?
Metallica was one of my first introductions in the heavy metal music, right? And I think it was kind of most people's that way, right? I didn't hear about Slayer until later, Pantera later. Like I grew up in the 80s, obviously in my musical upbringing from the time when you're 7, 8, 9 years old and you start getting into music. My introduction into metal was the hair metal scene of the 80s. That's what was popular, right? So the Poison, Metallica, Def Leppard, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, every 80s hair metal band is what I resonated with, because when I went to the record store and you had, you know, when you actually walked into a Sam Ash or an FYE back in the day, you had the top 10 albums, and it was Madonna, Paula Abdul, Guns N' Roses, right? So I'm attracted to the Skulls and the hard rock and heavy metal, right? So that's what got me into music, right? Those were the bands. I learned about that later, but Metallica was like my first intro into real heavy music, and I think a lot of people could say that, right? Like, I discovered Metallica before I discovered any other heavy metal band, right? Now, that's not saying that I didn't know who Kiss was and I knew who like those bands were, right? But as far as like heavy music goes, Metallica was my introduction to that. And I think a lot of kids my age, that are between, 35 and 55 years old, Metallica was that band for a lot of those people.
Yeah, man, it was the same with me, right? I was listening to synth pop that in the 80s, and I really liked that, like Yazoo, Depeche Mode, and all that.
Right, sure.
And I heard the Kiss. I mean, they didn't strike. I like Kiss a lot now, right? But not at the time. But all the cool kids that were at school were listening to Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and all those Thin Lizzy and whatever, right? And I tried it. Just didn't like it. And then came along like Voivod and Metallica and Megadeth and Slayer, and that was like, now we're talking, right? That's what got me going, So I skipped that whole hair metal thing, but just because. I got so much more out of the metal scene than I got out of the synth stuff or whatever, right? It was night and day. Like the energy and the community and all that stuff was so different. It was, a new world, right? And Metallica being one of those that got me there still feels like, guys, and remember where you're from at least. Like, don't, It started with the Napster thing, I think. I think that's when I think that,
that was
even fans that have been fans for a long time start to feel like, no, you guys, like you are billionaires, right? And you feel like you're getting robbed here.
So when that whole controversy came out, I was in college, right? And I had Kazaa, I had LimeWire, I had BearShare, I had Napster. We all had it, right? On every computer in our college dorms had those albums, and you would spend hours and hours and hours trying to find the one song that wasn't cut or split or, somebody had it, uploaded it 35,000 times. And by the time you got the digital copy, it sounded like it was coming out of a fax machine, right? So we spent hours at night in college, right? Having some beers, going through LimeWire to find 7 or 8 songs of the entire, album. And that's what we did, right? That was kind of like our bonding thing, right? Like we would sit there and burn CDs with the music that we had, right? And here's Lars comes along and says, listen, we want to shut that down. If you're not going to pay us, we don't want to have it. And then I remember at that time, you had bands like the Black Crowes. You had bands like, what was the one with Jerry Garcia? Grateful Dead, right? Grateful Dead said, bring a recording cassette thing and record our. We don't care, right? Come to our shows and record. We don't mind, right?
And the thing is that like, is Lars? Did he forget or so oblivious to what else was happening in the metal scene and what made metal? It was tape trading. It was sort of like someone recorded a cheap fucking demo on a 4-track Porta studio in their basement, and then it got traded around the planet, for free. The bands didn't make a fucking dime at any point, but that's how they got notoriety. That's how they got their record deals and whatever. It was because people were sharing the music freely, and nobody cared about getting paid or not. It was like, you're sharing my music, cool. Like that was the attitude. So it was the diehard fans. I think when Lars came out and said that about Napster, oh, we're not getting paid, then it was like, you lost us, bye bye.
At that time,
you're dead to me now.
And even in the heart of Napster and BearShare and Kazaa and all that stuff, if you wanted to buy an album, you still had to go to the store and buy an album, right? It wasn't digital at that point. All you were doing was sharing music at that point, right? If you wanted the album, you still went out and bought the album. You went to the store and bought it. You
Thank
didn't.
you, Misfit.
You couldn't download the whole album. It's not like it is now. Like I said, it would take you hours and
No.
hours and hours on Napster to try to find the 11 songs to make an album.
It became a larger platform to be able to get that stuff, but it still just duplicated whatever was happening otherwise anyway, right? So in the community that I was in Sweden, right, we had a number of people, but just because we were poor and we couldn't all buy the same records or whatever, right? There were people with their specialties. I wasn't the metal guy. Like my specialty was punk rock, pop punk, power pop, that sort of thing, right? So I kept my ear on the ground for that. Obviously we didn't know what was going. Like you need to have people that really had their pulse on the scene, right? But the thing is that I still knew a shit ton about metal. I still knew a shit ton about industrial. I still knew a shit about hardcore, right? Of all kinds, because there were other people in the community that had that. And, they got those records and we shared them and we gave each other cassette tapes, like, or when we could burn CDs. That's how, only one person needed to buy the record. And then the other 40, got their copy because he was great,
And it was like that in the States too, right? Like we did that as well, right?
But so that's why I'm saying that, just to turn it back to the Metallica thing, I think that the Napster thing, when he totally poo-pooed the notion of sharing their music for free. He wanted to get paid, and that's also when he started to backtrack. Oh no, it's about the art. He started saying that you want to get paid, and then it was like, no, it's about the art. Art shouldn't be free. Like artists still need to whatever, right?
I get it. Yeah,
he didn't succeed in the argument,
right? And I think that the big thing was is like. At that point, if it had been any other band other than Metallica hopping on board saying, hey, we want to get paid, you shouldn't be stealing our music, right? But they were like the one dog in the fight. None of the other bands stepped up and said, we're on the same band. It was like Metallica versus the world, right? And it wasn't even Metallica. It was like Lars versus the world.
Yeah. No, there were plenty of artists that were up against Napster, right? I mean, Steven Tyler, Aerosmith, and the Stones. There were tons of bands that were trying to fight Napster, right?
But how many metal bands?
Were the only metal band,
right? That's what I'm saying. There were no other metal bands that stepped up because at that point, bootlegging was a big thing in the metal community.
Because I think that the other metal bands knew that they had no business going there. Like it's been such an intrinsic part of the community. It's like I will support the shit out of every band I like. The difference is that if I download a song from Napster that I really like, I'm still gonna buy the fucking record. If I really like it. The mentality is there to support the bands that you like, or at least it used to be like that. So I just think that the Slayers of the world and those guys, they just left it alone. It's like, whatever, it's always been like that.
And I think too,
and Metallica just decided to cross that line and it didn't go well.
But that's what I was saying before, right? In the metal community, bootlegging was always a big thing, right? That they wanted you to share their albums. If you recorded the live demo, they never said anything. And I remember at concerts, going to concerts in the mid 2000s, right? When the show was over, there was a line to buy the recorded album right there on the spot. They would make they'd make a copy from the soundboard and they would sell the live version of that, for $15 or $20, right? And they had some cheap little paper insert because they were making them right there on the spot. But you would say, hey, awesome. I want a copy of this. They're like, yeah, here, come back in 10 minutes. We'll make a copy of it for you. And they would burn it off the board, right? And so that was the big thing. But
that's fantastic. I never saw that.
Yeah, and that's what like Metallica doesn't understand. And the first one I ever bought was the Black Crowes played the Riviera Theater in 1999, I think, or 2000. And we went to see them, and after the show, you could buy the CD. Was $20. It was a two CD thing from the soundboard of that show. I still have it.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I
think that's a great idea. I think that's super. What better momentum can get from being at a show than like I want to hear it again. Like especially if it was like oh shit, I was in the pit half the time. I
Right.
can
Yeah.
already remember the songs.
You
You
know,
know, like
and, and it was
that's
just,
awesome.
I think, that era of music transitioning from, you know, CDs to digital was the new wave, so to say, of music, right? Because where we're at now, I can't tell you the last time I bought a CD. I mean, it's got to be over 10 years, right? Anytime I wanted music, I go right to Apple, I download the song, and I put it in my playlist, right? Or if an album comes out and I like it, I download the album, right? I pay $9.99 a month, but I mean, what I pay for 1 month of unlimited music service is what it would cost me for one CD.
Yeah. Well, I bought two vinyl records on Wednesday, so.
Yeah, it's all right.
So I guess no, but yeah, sure. I listen to the Spotify most of the time too, but it's about discovery too, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And to be honest, a lot of the artists on Spotify actually don't release anything,
No,
physical
and
anymore, right?
right, and that's the thing,
So
right? And we talked about this the other day, right? Most of
there's
the
no
new
money in it
music
anymore.
that I find is through Instagram and Facebook scrolling, right? I'll hear a riff and I'll be like, oh, what band is this? And I'll go, and most of them now will link you right up to Apple Play or Spotify if you say, listen to this song, right? So that happened today with actually two bands that I was looking at, right? And I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool, right? And that we have it, and one of the bands that
Thank
I
you, Misfit.
actually
Have a good night. Sorry.
oh yeah, I didn't see the comment that he had.
Yeah, I know he was just saying good night. He's been a good participant, so I
Oh
just wanted to
yeah.
give him some love. Sorry.
But yeah, so they're like scrolling through Instagram, right? And you hear a catchy riff, or like, this is the heaviest thing on it, and it catches your ear, and then you're like, oh, I like this, and you go and you download it, right? So now that was the precursor to going to the record store, to putting the headphones on, to listening to the album,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great analogy. Like, the record store where you could go, like, I would like to try to listen to this album and see
Yeah,
if it's good enough for me to put my money on it. I think it's the same thing with Spotify and those two. But I also think that this is, for me, because I mean, I'm old, right? But I still feel like, I have music in me that I want
yeah,
to share and make, right? So this is part of uh, the mission of getting music out there too, is to have people relate to them, which is so entirely different from what it was
yeah,
in in the tape trading days or whatever, right? You had no idea who Pete Sandoval was on that Terrorizer demo tape or whatever,
yeah,
right? It's
right,
just a name
yeah,
on a credit, and then you would remember that, and oh, he's also in that band. That's
right,
the extent of it. But now it's so much about discovering people and finding out what they're about,
yeah,
and wanting to follow them for
and
that,
that
right?
was always the big thing, right? When somebody major left a band, like the first one I remember this happening with was Chris Barnes, right? When he left Cannibal Corpse to start 6 Feet Under, that was like the biggest thing in the metal community in that like 95, 96 era, because Cannibal Corpse was like one of the biggest metal bands at the time. And now you have the singer leave the band to start another band that got more notoriety than the band that he was in. 6 Feet Under blew up. That was like a huge thing in the US when Barnes left, because 6 Feet Under was on every major festival that you went to at that time. They were the act that everybody wanted to see. Everybody wanted to see Chris Barnes, right? And he was the voice of Cannibal Corpse for all those albums. Even on, we joke around, but like Ace Ventura, right?
Yeah,
Chris Barnes was on stage when Jim Carrey walked into the bar, and now you have a
yeah,
guy that left the band to start another band. That was like the first one, and then kind of, I know you're a fan of Sepultura, I am too, but like when Max left, right, and started Soulfly. Soulfly was much bigger than Sepultura ever had been.
yep, yeah. Also because Max was Sepultura, right? And it's
Right.
like, okay, yeah, Sepultura, they've done 3 great albums. Oh, he's doing something new. I think that's kind of okay. Now we're getting really sidetracked
I
out of
know, right?
Metallica a little bit, but maybe not. Um, it is that when the true, I guess, metal folks or whatever, it's like, no, I'm tired of the Sepultura thing. I need to do something new. Instead of saying that, hey, let's do something new with Sepultura, it's like, no, let's call it something else because it's not Sepultura. And like we wouldn't be able to tell the fans that this is Sepultura because it's something different. It's and so arguably with the Black Album, Metallica could have changed name to be called the Metallite or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, Metallica's done. We're gonna do a different thing now. People are still gonna know that it's me or us or whatever, right? But it's not Metallica, so let's call it something else. So
but then the thing at that point though too, like you got to remember what the Black Album came out in 94, right? 95, somewhere like that, right?
Yeah.
If they would have changed their name at that time, they were riding the coattail of the name Metallica because of their solid first 3 albums, like we mentioned before, right? So if they would have changed their name to, let's just say they went to, let's just say it was, metal, right? They dropped the Elica, right? And they're just like, we're just metal now, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if people would have, at that point, had the notoriety like they do now to go to the internet and say, who's in this new band metal, right? Like, it sounds very familiar. Is it the Metallica guys or is it not? Because back in those days, the only way you would have found out was Hit Parader, Metal Edge, right? Any one of the magazines that were there that said, hey, Metallica is no longer, they're starting this new band, right? Because the modern age, if you want to find out anything, you go right to, you're like, hey, I know that voice. Where do I know that voice from? And you type in the name of the band. They're like, oh, that's the singer that was in this band and this band. Like, oh, that's where I know him from, right? But back in the day, there was no access to that, right? So if something came out and it wasn't in any one of the major metal magazines, you'd have no idea.
But still, you made the point of 6 Feet Under and those guys, right? And Soulfly, that was kind of sort of around the same time too, right? Oh, Soulfly was a little bit later, I guess.
Soulfly was kind of pre-internet era, right? So Soulfly was kind of right on the cusp. 6 Feet Under was way before the internet, right? Like 6 Feet Under, I think was 96, 97. So that's way.
No, I mean, I realized that Metallica stayed and were capitalizing on their past 3 albums with, or 4.
It was named 6. Yeah.
It was 4 albums before the Black Album, right?
Yeah, 4 albums.
If you don't
technically,
count.
So
if you don't, Garage
they never
Inc.
count
might have been in between there.
Because they had, early back in the day, Metal Blade did a compilation album and Metallica was on there. That's how they got found, right? So they had the one song on the Metal Blade, whatever it was, compilation album, right? Because they had Garage Days in the beginning, right? It was their demo, was what they did. Garage Inc. was their first EP at that time, if you would have called it that, right? But before Puppets came to be, right? Which is why they made the Garage Days Inc. album with the cover songs on it. But back in the day, that was like their first few songs were on that album, right? So Metallica had,
it's like, how do you define it?
So Metallica had some steam going into, Puppets, Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All, right? Like they had that kind of like notoriety, right? But again, after the first album, when they kicked Dave Mustaine out of the band, right? Nobody cared because you didn't have access to that information, right? Metallica gets new guitarist Kurt Hammett. Well, if you didn't read it in a local magazine or a paper, you would have never known, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you knew if you were in that whole
right. If you were in the scene,
like
if you were in the scene, you'd have no idea.
And it was a global phenomenon of a thing, which is really fantastic of a thing. But obviously, it's not scalable, and it's certainly not profitable.
Right, and it didn't do anything, right? It didn't change the perception of the band.
But it's a culture and a mentality that I think like Slayer successfully managed to navigate that for themselves. Like they managed to become huge, but still, in the eyes of the fans, still feel like no, you never gave up on us. Yeah, fine. You released some shitty albums, but you didn't lose the philosophy of where you come from, right? You didn't lose the attitude of that, right? Which is what I think that Metallica certainly did, and they did it as a conscious decision.
Right. And again, that's the thing, right? With Metallica, they're that unique band where as many fans as they lost through the Black Album and the Load album, they gained that many more fans because Load was the first introduction to a lot of Metallica. They didn't know the catalog before that, right? You had a lot of 15 and 16-year-old kids that when Metallica's Load came out, that was their first introduction to Metallica.
Yep. No, and I think you're absolutely right too. That is the heaviest thing that they've ever heard, and they don't really. It doesn't really give them the motivation to see what could be heavier than this, right? I think that's kind of where, as far as they are allowed, I guess, or allow themselves, like it's they're safe, right? You know,
and that's
like
the thing, right? You had Metallica, who was
fine,
arguably the heaviest band at the time, right? Going into a genre that Alice in Chains, Godsmack, the lighter metal bands, Metallica fit right in with them, right? They cut their hair. It was a big controversy, right? They all went, to the sunglasses and leather jackets. They all looked like Sully Erna, right, from Godsmack. They all kind of were in that same vein, right? And that was their quote unquote transition, right? So from Metallica's standpoint, they were fitting in with modern music, but from the heavy metal community, they sold out, right? And that was kind of...
All right. So I think to conclude the discussion,
Yeah.
I would say that my stance now is Metallica, keep going if you want to. I'm still not going to be interested in you. I'm still going to be disappointed in you. I think that I don't think that you should quit because I say so. I think that you should quit because you can recognize that, you're not what you are, and stop kidding yourselves. If you want to revitalize yourselves, Lars should be replaced with some new blood, and maybe they can become relevant to me again. Maybe I will perk up if that happens.
Well,
those are kind of my final words on the topic right now.
My final 2 words are fuck Metallica.
I'm totally with you on that.
I've always been a Pantera fan.
More nicely than you.
I like we said, the last hour and a half, you give credit where credit's due, obviously, but Metallica, what they do now, I could care less. The first 3 albums, I appreciate them for what they are. I've always been a Pantera fan. I've always been a Megadeth fan. I could take Metallica with a grain of salt at this point. They're going to do what they're going to do. I'm not going to support them in any way. I'm just a person that when their songs come on the radio, I just lower it that much more.
Okay, so we should introduce some sort of penalty from now on when we bring up Metallica again, because they should be dead to us.
Right, like
you said the M word.
That we
now you have to run around the block.
Can't say the M word, right?
Let's do it. Okay, guys, I think it's time to wrap up, but I'm Kale, by the way, so if you want to follow my account, I post pretty much daily on TikTok, having opinions about metal or whatever, so you can follow me on Kale Arsenic. You see the spelling here, hopefully on the screen. And I'm with Mark, obviously, One Fun Guy Podcast. Together we call ourselves The Podkvlt. We are on Instagram, we're on YouTube. Please subscribe. We'll do this every week, right? So come back.
That's the game plan, right? To be as entertaining to the metal community as we can be. This is our goal. We always try to pick a topic and try to stick to it. We go on tangents. We're just 2 dudes that like heavy metal music. We spark some controversy with our thought process. We're still fans of the genre, right? We give credit where credit's due. That's not going to change. But we do appreciate the newer bands just as much as the older bands, the heritage, the everything that comes with it. But we have talking points of what we are. So next week, I think the topic might be then, other than Metallica, who would be a stadium seller. Let's name some bands that we think that could pack a stadium, modern day times, whether they're a newer band or an older band, but could still do it. Because I 5 come to mind right off the top of my head.
And neither one of them is Limp Bizkit.
Neither one of them is Limp Bizkit.
All right. Yeah. Appreciate everybody. It's the people that,
Sure, right? We couldn't do this
it's the
without
fun.
you guys.
The argumentation is the fun, and everybody loves geeking out, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah. That's it, right, guys? So thank you for the love and support. Thank you for the likes, the follows, and the shares. Thank you for all the gifts that we received throughout the show. We will be on next Saturday night at 9 o'clock unless something weird happens or changes. But 9 o'clock next Saturday night, the Podkvlt will be back. Follow Kelly, follow One Fun Guy Podcast. We're here, guys. We'll be on, and keep up the positive energy and stay metal, guys. All right,
Cheers.
we'll see you guys next Saturday night. All right.